everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tiff Talks Tech. Today, I have invited my friend Dave Holland to talk about overcoming the data gap in multifamily. I know that was a big issue when I was on the operator side, and I'm excited to dive in. But, Dave, before we get started, can you just share a little bit about you and what you do?
Absolutely. Hey, thanks so much for having me, Tiff. It's a pleasure to be here. As you said, I'm Dave Holland. I am in the upstate New York area. I'm the chapter president for the IREM New York Capital Region chapter, and I work for Sunrise Management and Consulting. We are a multifamily operator. We have about 1,100 or so apartments and a couple of hotels, about 200 hotel rooms on the Capital Region area of New York. And I've been in multifamily for about 8 years.
Hey, we're tied.
That's right.
So, what are some challenges and obstacles you see multifamily property managers face when it comes to leveraging their data most effectively?
So in the last, I'm going to go with 8 years because that's how long I have, experience with it. There's been this explosion in prop tech in different companies and industries and operators and suppliers, and everyone's trying to get everyone's attention to do the one very specific thing, right? So whether it's water sub-metering or reports or AI chatbots, right? Like literally, there's so many different ways that you could plug technology into your operation on the site and for your property. And one of the challenges is that it just becomes so fragmented, right? There's so many different programs and things out there. It's hard to kind of keep a holistic view of what's going on with the operation because there's just so much going on, right? You have so many different logins and websites. We were looking at our tech stack a little while ago when we realized that like, wow, we have 94 different technologies in our tech stack. And that's just a lot to, bond to and try to keep track of and figure out what's effective and what's not and where you can maybe save some costs by turning some things off or combining or what you're paying for, but you're not using all the features of. Another issue is data quality. Right? You might have incomplete or inaccurate data, right? We all know garbage in, garbage out. The information, the data you're getting out of your multiple systems is only going to be as good as you put into it. Inconsistent data entry and management practices is another touch point. So you could have multiple property managers or regional managers within your portfolio, and maybe they're entering the information, but in different ways. So how do you know that it's all a tour is a tour, an application is an application, right? If one person considers the application to be complete when they filled in the paper, but they haven't necessarily given the pay stubs or paid the application fee, and another manager says, no, it's not complete until all those things are done, what's the right answer? You're going to have inconsistent data. And then, of course, as with every industry, we've got resistance to adopting new technologies. Change is hard. Change is scary, right? So the bigger the operator, the harder the ship is to turn. It's, gonna give you some issues with leveraging your data.
Yeah, and I think, like you were saying, having so many different systems that adds to the resistance of adopting those new technologies because I hear it all the time. Oh, I don't want another dashboard. I don't want to teach my team another dashboard. But
Log in, another thing to train on. And yeah, it compounds. It does.
yeah. And you and I talked a little bit a few days ago about the fact that, I would spend hours on the operator side just going through my reports and consolidating them, putting them in one place to share with the executive team. And a lot of times I'm trying to see if that data is accurate. Like you were saying, a lot of it
Yeah.
isn't. And I have to make sure that if I am seeing something in one place, it's the same in another. Otherwise, what's going on?
So one of the big things I keep hearing in the industry is the single source of truth. You have lots of different platforms and dashboards and whatnot, but you have to be able to rely on at least one of them to have the correct information, the correct data. And the more things you have, the more time you have to spend just ensuring that everything is accurate to everything else.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really clear that there is a big data gap in our industry. And
Absolutely.
how does that impact all of the different areas that we work in, like operations, leasing, maintenance, financial performance, all of it?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we property managers, multifamily, we wear a lot of hats, right? There's a lot going on the sites. Data gaps can lead to inefficiencies and missed opportunities. In leasing, the lack of data can result in maybe a pricing strategy that's suboptimal right? If every unit is priced exactly the same and you're noticing that 10, 20% of them are leasing really fast and you know, somewhere else on the property, they're leasing really slow. Probably could have gotten more money for the ones that are more desirable. Maybe there's a better view. Maybe there's whatever the situation, right? You could also have slower response time to market changes if you have a data gap, right? So if all of your competitors are keeping up with kind of the industry and the market and they're lowering rents or they're offering concessions or they're adopting a new type of amenity and you're not paying attention to what's going on, you have a slower response time, your operations, your income is going to suffer because of it. But for maintenance, it could mean rather than proactive maintenance, you've got higher costs and resident dissatisfaction, right? I'll give you an example for one of our sites. You have fire hydrants on the site. Somewhere, down the line, one of our managers said, "Oh, fire hydrants, that's the town's responsibility." Come to find out, it was our responsibility to flush the hydrants. After 10 years of not flushing them, they didn't work anymore. So we had to pay upwards of $50,000 to replace the fire hydrants that we could have just paid $1,000 a year to flush. And during that whole time of getting them all redone, none of the residents could use their water because, it had to be corrected. Preventative maintenance, data gap. And that was really simple. It was just whose responsibility is this?
Yeah. It seems so simple when you put it that way, but it's something we
Yeah,
don't always think about.
absolutely, right? Without comprehensive data, understanding resident satisfaction can be challenging. So if you have three types of complaints, right? If you have someone complaining that the property manager didn't listen to them about whatever situation, and you have another type of complaint about the noise issues between the apartments, right? That doesn't really tell you what you need to go and focus on. Because if you have two types of complaints, but you're seeing one once every 6 months and one 30 times a month, that's a type of data that you're missing when you just look at the types of complaints. You need to know the frequency, the quantity. So it allows you to better understand your operation and address the problems that are more prevalent and need to be addressed.
So I want to talk about obviously data is the most important thing to us marketers. We're looking at it all the time. But I want to talk more about how important it is in our industry and how when we take the time to focus on that data gap and overcoming it, how that actually impacts our business in a positive way.
I mean, 100%, absolutely, right? So there's a certain point in the scale of your operation where you can keep it all in your head. Maybe you have two, three, four, 5 units, and you can pretty well handle what's going on. Maybe you're really smart and you can handle 20, 50, 100 units worth of data. You know when people are moving out, you know when they're moving in, you know what's going on with as far as rent payments and pets and all the things you got to keep track of. But at some point, you have a large enough portfolio that you simply can't keep it in your head. Or you have multiple employees and then you don't know what's in everyone else's head and if they've got the correct information and you have to start documenting and you have to start tracking. And the only way to grow your portfolio, grow your business is to have really cleanly organized sources of data that you can rely on and everyone can look to and say, this correct and accurate, and we can make informed decisions because of it. We can optimize our rent pricing. We can focus on occupancy rates. We can do maintenance, preventative maintenance. We can do predictive maintenance. We can reduce costs because of that preventative maintenance. We can reduce downtime. We can enhance resident satisfaction through personalized services. If you have the type of data that says you see this tenant is going to the gym every day, right? You have a gym on site and they're hitting it every day, 5 times a week, right before they go to work. In your renewal offer, you can say, hey, gym costs are expensive. And by renewing your lease, even though it's a 3, 4, 5% increase, you're still saving than having to have a gym membership because I know you use the gym, right?
Yeah.
That kind of information is a huge driver in resident satisfaction and renewals and occupancy, and then ultimately the value of the property.
Totally. And I mean, if you have any ancillary income programs, it can also help with that as well. Sell
Absolutely.
it. Yeah. So, like we were talking about, data is so important. What are those most important pieces that you think property managers should always be looking at? And how do we make sure that we have the most accurate and comprehensive data sources for it?
Sure. Sure. So there's like a pulse of the property, the heartbeat of the property, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of your vital signs. You got to know at least these handful of things to be able to say you have a feeling of what's going on,
Yeah.
right? So occupancy rates, rental pricing trends, maintenance requests, right? Or if you have 75 maintenance requests and they're all getting completed within one day, That could be a good thing, but if 90% of them are getting reopened because they weren't completed correctly, maybe that's something that you should be looking into, right? That information that you should be tracking, a KPI, a key performance indicator, right? You should be looking at feedback from your residents, right? If you're doing move-ins left and right, but people are unhappy with the condition of the apartment upon move-in, or they push back upon the fees because it wasn't made clear to them that there was a pet fee, or there was a water sewer fee, you know, you're going to start getting negative reviews. And it's these kinds of feedback that if people are willing to share with us, we hope that they are, we should be listening to, right? As far as ensuring access to accurate and comprehensive data, you got to have a property management system that's able to consolidate data from various sources,
Yeah.
right? So you need to have one thing that's like the heart of all of your tech stack. Because if you have a disparate kind of environment of hobbled together tech things, there's no one, thing that says this is the correct, this is the single source of truth. I'll give you an example. I was looking at one of our down the road competitors the other day, and they don't seem to have a property management system. They have a whole bunch of little pieces that when you add them all up, it's getting the job done, right? They're using Blue Moon leases from NAA. They're using pet screening for their pet stuff. They're using a facilities maintenance thing for tracking work orders. They're using like a 2 dots for a resident verification. And all of these individual pieces collectively, they're getting the job done. But I'm sure the office staff are pulling their hair out because they got to log into 6 different things to process one application,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's crazy. I don't hear about that very often, but it's out there. Companies that are not
It is.
using a single source of all their data in one
Yeah.
spot.
And you gotta audit it's accurate, right? If you're getting reports that say everything is fine, but you look in the bank account and everything is not fine, you gotta figure that one out, right?
Yeah, definitely. So I want to dive into some strategies that property managers can use to bridge that gap and get the info they need to make the most of their operations and the most of the resident experience as well.
So, a little bit of what we're doing here at Sunrise Management. So we kind of agree that there was an issue, right? There was a data gap issue. We weren't really happy with reporting, and to your point earlier, we weren't happy spending time sitting at our desk just trying to compile reports, trying to color code and figure out what's going on. If you're spending 20 hours of your week just trying to pull together spreadsheets to figure out what's going on, that only leaves you the other 20 hours, if you're working a normal 40-hour week, to actually go and address problems and solve issues. And we were struggling with it. We were really frustrated. So what we did is we kind of sat down and we took a big holistic view and we said, what is our company's expectations? What are our thresholds? And we had this meeting with all the stakeholders and we said, what's a normal amount of response time for a work order? What's a normal amount of time to get an application processed in? And we went through the whole company and set all these kind of standards, thresholds, I would say. And then we started training on it. We said, all right, we want everybody to perform to the same thresholds and expectations. Because if you have a property where they're turning work orders really fast, right? Get them done in 1 day, 2 days, and then you have the company expectation being 5, 6, 7 days. If a resident at one site either jumps over to a different site, or maybe the property manager moves to a different site, which does happen, right? And they start enforcing the rules differently, you could have warped expectations. You
Yeah.
could have somebody who says, before this property manager was here, I was getting my work orders done in like a day or two. Now it's like 5 or 6 days. So I'm not happy.
Yeah.
But reality is the company policy is we're going to get them done within 7 days, right? So we want everyone to be playing on the same level. And the second thing is we don't want to be micromanaging our people. If you're playing within that 3 day application turnaround time, all of your residents are paying their rent by the 30-day mark. That's great. I don't need to micromanage you. You're doing your job, right? I only, as the supervisor, need to worry about when the couple of things that are outside of those thresholds. So if I see a work order that's 10 days, 15, 20 days open, you better expect I'm going to be holding someone accountable. What's going on? Why has Susie in apartment 12 had a broken window for 3 weeks, right? But if Susie's broken window is taken care of within 7 days, I'm good. I don't need to bother anyone about that. They're doing their job, you know?
Yeah.
So what we ultimately did, and I'm sorry this is a long-winded answer,
No, I'm glad.
is we pulled all the reports that we needed because you got to pull a whole bunch of different reports and bump around and try to figure out a whole picture of what's going on. And we fed everything into one kind of dashboard that just is like a one sheet. It sums it all up and then it color codes and it says, these are the the hot spots. These are your red flags that you need to go focus on, right? You got 85 work orders open, 75 of them are from the last week. You only got to worry about these last 10. Go figure out what's going on with these 10. That way, people aren't getting upset that stuff is taking too long. Everything else is within expectations. It's fine. It'll get cleaned up, right? And if it doesn't, we'll worry about it next week. And doing that, giving that tool to our property managers and regional managers allowed everyone to cut through the noise of data because there was just so much data and give them the relevant information that they needed to actually do their job.
Yeah,
Right?
definitely. I remember when I was on that side, any property that was below 96% occupancy, operations team would say, marketing, figure out what's going wrong with this. And we said, okay. So we would every month have an Excel sheet with all these different reporting metrics that we looked at to say, oh, well, your ratings and reviews are really low. Maybe you need to work on so and so. But it was so time consuming. And I
It's
think
to
if
pull the
we had,
information.
right, if we had an automated source to pull that in, I
Yeah,
think it would have really saved us a ton of time. And as
yeah,
a marketer on the property management side, you're usually over so many properties and
sure.
you want something to just do it for you because there is
Yeah.
no time in the
And
day.
here's the next level of that, right? So you weren't being called in to solve the problem until it was a big problem,
Right.
right? 96% occupancy. Clearly, at some point, there was 97% occupancy, there was
Mm,
98% occupancy, and it was trending downwards.
right.
And nobody caught the trend until it was a problem.
Right.
Right? So what we're doing with our fancy spreadsheet is we're trying to forecast forward and look at leading indicators to say, look, this month we're at 98% occupancy, but next month and the month after we're trending downwards. We need to do something about it now. Because as you know from the marketing side, you can't just turn on the leads. There's a lag time. You can push the contracts and put out the Craigslist ads, but it takes time for them to take effect and the phone to start ringing. So if you have a problem now, it might take 2, 3, 4 weeks to catch back up. And if you're already trending downward, you don't have that time to wait for the system to catch back up to you. You want to be running a little bit in advance of what's going on. You got to be looking at the leading indicators and not the lagging indicators.
Right, and one of the frustrations we had too was that we always felt well, we always knew looking at the data that our leads were good. And we would get frustrated when we would see the site team not converting them and turning them
Yeah.
into anything. And so that was just a waste of money to us putting into advertising when we could have, maybe put our resources into training the team or working with them in a certain area if we had known by
Yeah.
looking at that data ahead of time.
Because, if the leads are satisfactory, if you have enough coming in this month and enough coming in the next month, and the only difference, the variable, is that you have maybe a new leasing agent who's not doing as well at converting the leads. Is
Yeah,
that really the marketing department's problem to solve? Or is that
exactly.
maybe a trading issue?
Definitely. So this would not be Tip Talks Tech if we didn't talk about some tech solutions. So are there
All right.
anything, yeah, that's helping properties overcome that data gap?
Absolutely. So going to back to our sunrise management story. So this fancy spreadsheet that we put together, we were using internally. And a couple of years ago, I was at an IRM conference in Chicago, and I saw a friend of mine who was looking at her daily reports, and she was literally hand tallying with pen and paper the number of phone calls and emails that she had gotten the day before so that she could type that number into an Excel sheet and send the Excel sheet to her regional manager. And I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Oh, all over across our portfolio are 50 properties. Everybody sends in an Excel spreadsheet that's typed up of the tally marks they made yesterday of the results of the leasing activity. And then our regional manager compiles all 50 of these spreadsheets every day and then tries to figure out where he can spend his time to be most effective to train the people and increase the effectiveness of the leasing team."
Yeah.
And I was like, holy moly, you're all spending so much time doing something that we're doing automatically. And where our company is a fifth of the size of yours. And coming from that conversation, our fancy spreadsheet, they approached us, that company, and they said, "Hey, can we get a version of this?" We're like, it's not really for sale, but sure, I guess. Why not? Right? So we gave them a version of that for their company, and like instantly things started happening that they had never had the ability to see, and it was in their data. So I'll give you an example. So we had just turned it on for them the first time, and we had like a training meeting, and we were showing them this is how it works, and here's where you click, and all these things. And we got to the renewals page, and we showed them that 6 months ago, one of their managers issued 3 renewals. Now, obviously, she issued hundreds, but 3 of the hundreds of renewals that she had issued, the rent went down upon renewal.
Mm.
2 of them it went down by $50, and one of them went down by $200. And the regional manager like fell out of his chair. He was like, "Oh my God, I knew there was something going on at that property with that manager. I just didn't know what it was." We were like, "Dude, this is your data. We're just showing it back to you in a way that you can actually see it because there's just so much of it."
Yeah.
And apparently the company was pushing occupancy so hard that the focus was so hard on occupancy they didn't notice when the manager was lowering rent to keep the units occupied.
Mm,
So flash forward a little bit, we said, hey, maybe this fancy spreadsheet could be helpful to some other operators, because obviously it is. And we put some money into development, and now it's a web-based platform called Property Gauge. And I got moved from the property management side of things over to the software side of things. So my day-to-day duties have changed greatly. And at this point, it's just kind of reaching out, talking to people, connecting, and saying, hey, I might have a solution that can solve some problems that you're seeing. And if
yeah.
spreadsheets are frustrating you, let's talk.
Yeah, and that's really nice because you're in the seat as well, and that's
Yeah,
where I take a lot as well. Having been in the property management seat, we know this is an issue,
this is an
and
issue.
this is
Yeah.
how we can overcome it together.
Not just another solution looking for a problem, right? It's
Right.
actually a problem that we solved for ourselves. And we were never intending to offer to other people. But then people came knocking. We were like, all right, sure, here you go.
That's awesome. So we talked a little bit about the predictive modeling and just knowing ahead of time what's coming. Are there any other techniques and pieces of information that can help teams find what's coming up in the next
Yeah.
few months?
Oh, yeah. I mean, as much as you want to put into it, the resources are out there, right? You've got machine learning, you've got IoT devices, there's smart home technology, you could build algorithms, you could have all kinds of different analytical tools, right, out there to give you whatever insights you're willing to pay for, right? The problem is how much of it is useful and how much of it is just another cool shiny thing, right? I
Right.
was at a conference and they had this whole thing about IoT devices, Internet of Things devices, where you could put like a sensor in the parking lot so that it would tell you if a car was parked in that spot. And I was like, okay, what are the multifamily applications of this? And they're like, oh, well, we can tell you if a car has been sitting in the same spot for 6 months. I'm like, yeah, I could tell you the same thing. I walk my site every day.
Yeah,
I don't need to spend thousands of dollars to rip up my parking lot to put a sensor in that's probably going to fail when it snows.
that's very true. And I do want to shift gears just a little bit. So, one of the issues I ran into all the time was integrations and things not working well together. So, what role does standardization play in overcoming that with integrations and streamlining that data?
Yep. So the more systems you have, the more likely it is not everything is normalized,
Right.
right? What you might call a lead over here is called a prospect over there,
Mhm.
right? If you're on the marketing side, if you're advertising on Meta and you're advertising on apartments.com and you're advertising on For Rent and Zillow and all these different places, some of them might charge per click, some of them might charge per lead, some of them might just charge a flat amount for the contract. So how do you break it down and say, what's my cost per lead or cost per move in? You got to normalize the data. You got to get it all into one database, and it might be a spreadsheet, it might be a relational database. And you got to say, this is the way we do this. This is the way we look at this. This is the formula we use, and we're going to apply it consistently. And then once you have your clean, normalized data, you can use it to make decisions. Because it's like going to the grocery store, right? If a bag of chips is $6 and the smaller bag of chips is $4, how do you know which one's the better value?
Yeah,
You got to break it down to the price per ounce, and then you can make a decision. It's the
right.
same story.
Definitely. Just a little more involved.
Yep, just a little more involved than the going to the grocery store.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, looking ahead, are there some trends that you see in data analytics and tech? And are there any tech that you see promising to bridge that gap?
Yeah. So obviously, you want to be analyzing your historical data to identify patterns and trends, right?
Yeah.
If you go to any regional manager who's been in the business 20, 30 years, right? So before all this prop
Yeah.
tech stuff, before they were using softwares, they were doing it with an abacus. Probably not that bad, but they've been in it for a while,
Yeah.
right? And you said, what's the turnover? How many units are you going to turn over at this site? And they're like 30%, 35% at the most. Every year, no matter what the situation, whether it's a recession or it's a booming economy, we're always turning over 30 to 35%. Okay, what are you basing that on? But fair
Right.
enough. You have 30 years, you might have the correct, assumption because you've been doing it long enough. But for anyone who doesn't have that much experience working at the same site for multiple decades, you need that same kind of data, right? You can pre plan how many maintenance technicians you'll need. You can pre plan how much supplies you'll need. You can budget and say, my turnover expenses will be, but only if you have historical data to say, on average, we're turning over this many units in a year. So historical data to look at patterns and trends is the first one, right? And you want to be forecasting. You want to kind of figure out future scenarios like vacancies, which again is based on turnover and financial performance, right? So if you know the inflation rate is 8, 9, 10%, and your rental renewal rate is 3, 4, 5%, that's not sustainable, right? Your asset's not going to be making the return that you're hoping for in the long run simply because it's just not keeping up with inflation,
Yeah.
right? So financial performance, budgeting, you want, again, accurate data so that you can make correct decisions and, proper insights. And then you want to address and identify potential risks early. We all know everything has a lifespan. A carpet, a toilet, a roof, only going to last so many years.
Yeah.
And if you don't keep track to say, look, we installed this roof in 2002, then in 2022, when it's 20 years old and it's time to replace it, you're going to have a big surprise for your owner when there's a capital call because you needed to replace a roof that you probably could have planned for, but you didn't.
Yeah. Definitely. That totally makes sense. And I think that is very useful for site teams to keep in mind for sure. So I do have one final question as we wrap
Hit me.
up. Oh, it doesn't have to be related to this, but bonus points if it is. What is one tech tool that you are loving right now and just using all the time?
Well, I'm going to self promote. I'm sorry.
No,
We're
do
using
it.
Property Gauge.
Yeah.
It's helping us quite a lot. We've found that if you look at our operational data from before we were using it, it was very up and down, right? Good
Yeah.
times, bad times, things happen, and then you react to them. And now it's much more stable, right? Things as they become an issue are being addressed so they don't become an issue. And if you can run your property in a stable fashion, you're going to have much more predictable, stable, ever increasing income rather than a couple of good months, a couple of bad months.
Yeah. At this point, we can't afford to the ups and downs. For a long time, property management was completely stable, but I think just as things change, we need to stay on top of it. So using
Right.
tools like that, it really helps do the job.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Also, I want to say that it's incredibly important to stay informed, right?
Right.
What's going on in the legal landscape? That's going to affect your operation. What's going on in the local market? That's going to affect your operation. Is there a major employer that's maybe they're going through layoffs? Or is
Yeah.
there something going on that you should really be aware of? So it's important to be involved in your local associations. It's important to be involved in the national level of those associations. I'll give you two as an example. So IREM, the Institute of Real Estate Management, and also the National Apartment Association, NAA, they both do days in DC where they go and they lobby the legislators for the major issues coming up in the housing industry that are going to have an impact in the coming months. And no matter if you're a independent rental owner with 1, 2, or 10 units, or a major operator with hundreds of thousands of units, your voice matters,
Yeah.
right? It's important to go out there and show those that we've elected that we're here and we're passionate and we want things to be appropriate for all sides of the table, right?
Yeah. I love it. That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of the info about data. I really appreciate it. Where can people connect with you if they want to learn more?
I'm happy to connect. Absolutely. My network is growing on LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn/Dave Holland CPM. Or if you want to visit Property Gauge, it's just thepropertygauge.com. And I'll also be at Apartmentalize. No matter what year you're listening to this, I will be at Apartmentalize. And I'm usually also involved in a lot of the IREM get-togethers, IREM Global Summit, although next year it's changing its name to PropertyCon, so I'll be at whatever named appropriately IREM conference is. And I'd love to connect, grow the network, and I'm always happy to share and chat with anyone.